Hi, I'm Heather, and I want to talk about the wreath that's behind me. So that doesn't seem like anything particularly creepy or spooky, but the wreath behind me is actually made of human hair. This is part of the Victorian cult of mourning in a way, because in the Victorian era, people were really interested in remembering their loved ones in many different ways. This was popularized by Queen Victoria herself, whose beloved husband Albert died, and then she, of course, only wore black for the rest of her life. But people would often make crafts throughout human history from human hair, and jewelry especially was really popular. This wreath, however, was made by the hair of family members that were alive at the time. They probably just saved it for when they got a haircut so that they could all put this together to have this really beautiful work of art made by an entire family. However, there are many pieces in museums all over the country that are a little bit more haunted than that.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm the curator here at the Frazier. I'm excited to talk to you about one of my favorite, creepiest things that we have in our collection. That is these gallows rings. So when somebody was sentenced to death by hanging, the rope that they were hung with would actually go through these rings. So these rings were outside the Church Street Prison in Nashville, and that operated from 1858 to 1883. And these rings were actually standing outside that building until 1966. So I think these are pretty creepy on their own. Just think about how many people must have been hung from them to be executed. But actually one of the most notorious criminals from the Civil War was hung from them, and that was Champ Ferguson. He was a Kentuckian, and he was a guerrilla fighter in the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy. And he was known to have bragged about killing over 100 men, and included in that was a group of wounded men that were wounded in the Battle of Saltsville, and it was an all-black 5th United States Colored Cavalry. Champ and his men went in and just executed all of the wounded men that were defenseless. So Champ Ferguson was one of only 2 people that were tried, convicted, and executed for war crimes during the Civil War. The other one was Henry Wurz, who was a commander at the Anderson Prison, which was a Confederate prisoner of war camp. And the conditions were so bad there that it was basically a concentration camp. So you can see how bad the crimes of Champ were, that he was executed along with this other man. We think these rings are pretty haunted. The last time they were on display, one of our preparators cut himself really badly and had to go get stitches while he was installing these rings. So we try not to touch them as much as possible.
Just inside the gates of St. Stephen's Cemetery on Preston Street sits the grave of Otto Emil Voigt. He was a survivor of the Battle of Little Bighorn who spent the end of his life in Louisville. But here in our gallery sits another headstone for a soldier at Little Bighorn who wasn't so lucky. Or maybe not actually. A fair question would be, how did a gravestone from Little Bighorn wind up in a case at the Frazier Museum instead of over a fallen soldier? And that's a good question. The famous 1876 battle between the 7th Cavalry Forces and the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho was a bloody affair. In the immediate aftermath, bodies of the routed American troops were buried in shallow graves. Later, when the U.S. Army went back to make more formal and permanent graves, they put these marble headstones up. But it turns out they put up too many. They later realized that there were more headstones than bodies. So several of the excess grave markers were removed, and one of them sits on display right here, a headstone without a grave.
The next spooky artifact is right behind me. It's the casket wagon, which is located in the Civil War Gallery on the 2nd floor. This wagon is important for a number of reasons, the main one being that it helped transport Civil War soldiers to their final resting place in Cave Hill Cemetery. The Civil War completely reshaped how we perceive death as a country, and it also led to the reshaping of cemeteries as we know them today. So in Cave Hill, you can find 6,100 Union soldiers buried there, and an additional 228 Confederates buried in a separate lot nearby. And the Civil War also led to a few other advancements. It helped doctors and scientists start to experiment with embalming and preserving bodies to fight against decomposition. Often identifying bodies on a battlefield was really difficult. And not only that, it was really hard to get a hold of their families. So often, if someone died, it was left to their companion or friend to write home to the family to let them know what had happened. So later, Clara Barton developed a system, a federal initiative to help write home to families and make sure the messages were sent to the appropriate place. And you'll also know Clara Barton as one of the founders of the Red Cross.
Hey, we're here in the What is a Vote Worth Suffrage Then and Now exhibit, and I've brought my friend Claire with me, who comes to a lot of our youth programming and knows lots about the exhibit, so she's going to share one of her favorite things that fits really well into our spooky theme today.
So, one of my favorite things inside this exhibit is this green dress. I like to call it the poisonous dress.
So I bet people are wondering why Claire calls this dress the poison dress, so she's going to tell us a little bit more.
It's because the dress is made out of poisonous chemicals called arsenic. It can make you feel dizzy or sick.
Yeah. So I bet if people wore it, they would often make other things too, so that people could feel really dizzy or sick, get sores on their skin. Sometimes their hair even fell out. Did they use this dangerous dye on anything besides dresses and beautiful gloves?
Yeah, they use it on wallpaper and to make flowers look fancier. And this is a dress to die for.